Sí, vamos a empezar, ¿vale? Aunque todavía sigue entrando gente. Pero nos irá llenando los que tarden de comer. O sea que ya. Buenas, ¿qué tal? Muchas gracias por ser puntuales.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for being so punctual. You know that it is very difficult sometimes to have eat here, to eat at this place at Kinepolis, which is well, a cinema theater. All right. So Javi, he's not known to us at Rooted, not at all. He's very well known to us. Javier and David come from TarLogic. Well, the rule that we set out for Rooted conference is that the techniques, presentations have to be technical in nature. But because, well, now it is up to you to introduce yourselves, okay? Well, as you can see, the title of the presentation is You Again, Tovarich. So you've seen, okay, we have just had it, okay, this question mark in front of the statement. This is what we do in proper Spanish. Okay, so my name is Javier Rodríguez. I am the responsible for the Department of TarLogic Security. I've been doing that since 2017. So I also fix washing machines, which is also important piece of information. And then I come from Guardia Civil, from law enforcement agency. My name is David Sánchez. I've been working at the cybersecurity department of TarLogic for 2 years now. I don't fix washing machines, but I also do other type of things. So what he does is not illegal at all. It's fully legal. So we at TarLogic, we don't do anything illegal. So what is our presentation about? Well, this presentation is not very usual. So I've been working as a civilian for 13 months, and I've been seeing lots of reports from experts. So when they take a malware sample and then they put the blame on the Russians, okay? So this man must be like really, really busy with so much accountability. When you put on a TV, then it's everything talks about Putin here and there, everywhere. But sometimes we tend to forget about two things. First of all, there are other actors, other players than Russia, other strategic players, and there are also other people doing malware to gain intelligence and then attributions. We are interested in finding out about attribution and to tell you more about how attribution is being made, and then cyber intelligence. Hopefully we will have some time to refer to it at the end of the presentation. So also very important, or something important before we start, when people ask me, what about, well, this change of life, okay, you've changed your life dramatically. Well, I come from the Guardia Civil, so I've been working with this man for 6 to 7 years. He's one of my career references, and he was also all the time telling me, okay, do not get into trouble, do not get into trouble. So this is my first day on TarLogic. There were minions everywhere shooting arrows at me. But the change was a bit like that. But then they went and said, look, you have infiltrated yourself. What is it like to be infiltrated in TarLogic? Well, basically, after doing some research, this is what I eat, what I drink, and then this is a pictogram. Okay. Now, going back to the topic. As I was saying, we will be studying or analyzing for malwares, which are quite trendy. They come with reports carried out by a number of researchers. What we did was just to take those samples. Some of those samples were difficult for us to find. We found them, we got them, and then we analyzed them. Second part will be analyzing the techniques and tactics and procedures used to communicate the infection. So my colleague David will start, and then I will take over. Careful with what you say. Well, are you censoring me? Well, So this work is not only my work, it is the work of the reversing team at Tarlogic. The team is made up of many people. If you have doubts about it, talk about Maastricht, Gonzalo, Diego. Well, this is a work of all of us. However, I've been appointed to be the spokesperson. So I will tell you about the characteristics of the malware, I will tell you about the impact of it, the objectives of it, and to whom it is attributed. So we will be analyzing both ransom as well as APTs, because I was told that this was a bit of a general presentation. Okay, so ransomware. If you want to decrypt it, you have to pay for it. And then the definition of Wikipedia of APT. It is a very lengthy, verbose definition. Basically, we can summarize it as following. This is a malware tool with a set of objectives, either data filtration, cyber espionage, profit. It lasts over time. Well, perhaps it doesn't persist over time. We will take a look at that, and it is often distributed by an organization. We have selected 4 malware, very different one from each other. Okay, the first one is WannaCry. Well, many of you are aware of it, others may have also suffered it. It is a ransomware that was discovered last year in May. The first patient 0, was infected 24 hours after the release of the exploits of Eternal Blue. 24 hours later, the first attacks were being noticed in major companies in Spain and in Europe, and impact was global impact. All these malware, we analyzed them at Tarlogic, and we've drawn our conclusions. So we got a sample of WannaCry. We could see that a new service was created. It was propagated through Eternal Blue vulnerability. It came in with an zipped file that we managed to unzip because it always used the same encryption key. And then what we could see in there, the typical thing that you find in ransom, RTF files with different type of texts to inform users what to do to decrypt the PC. And then Antonio also told us that you had straightforward address to command and control dashboard. And then we also found the wallets of Bitcoin when the person was asked to deposit money to decrypt the PC. The vector of infection was Eternal Blue, a tool. It was open source because it was made public. It was not restricted, it was not a paid tool. And then Eternal Blue was embedded in the binary code. And they also used a double pulsar. So impact was global, we are all aware of it, it was very much on the news. And then attributions of this malware, according to Kaspersky, were people that had good commands of Chinese and English language, and they were performing or behaving similarly to Lazarus Group. So it has been attributed, Lazarus Group has been attributed to a group in North Korea. Tuku 2.0, I don't know whether you are aware of it. It is believed to be one of the most sophisticated APTs ever. Tuku 2 is an APT that was discovered in 2015. It was discovered by Kaspersky because it was one of the victims. But apparently, they said that the first sample was discovered in 2011 and that their conversion comes from 2014. Personally, it was very difficult for us to get a sample, and actually we didn't get it in the end, but what we got were several modules and plugins that could be added to the APT. So it was distributed as an MSI package, which is a way to install remote packages and services. All the names had been obfuscated with a short key of 32 bits. It used several types of encryptions. It had its own algorithms, encryption algorithms, and it was very difficult to get like a clear conclusion. It came in with various signatures in the binary. It was very difficult for us to get information out of it. So these are the two encryption algorithms that we found, Camellia and another one, because it was very difficult to get information from this malware. So we looked at the papers published by Kaspersky, which was one of the impacted firms, and we could see that it was actually very sophisticated. It was very complex. It was very difficult, first of all, to detect and then to get information out of it. It implemented 3 0-days that were discovered through the APT. It was signed with a certificate stolen from Foxconn. This is a Chinese hardware manufacturer. It had a certificate validated and very signed that certificate was stolen and used to sign this APT. So more than 100 plugins have been discovered up until to date, and we believe that there are other plugins yet to be discovered. And because in APT, let us talk about persistence. But this is a very interesting case because persistence was quite difficult to find because once you restarted the machine, it disappears. All the traces in the machine about the APT were eliminated as you switch off a computer. So it was installed through the drivers that it used to be installed in the gateways and in the routers, and then it went back to infecting the machines. And the way that it used to exfiltrate information was about through GPS or give images with encrypted information. So it was very difficult to find suspicious traffic in the network. Impact was the following. Below 100 teams, one of the 0 patients was Kaspersky. Apparently one of the top managers was infected through a spear phishing attack, and other victims of the malware apparently were the members of Iran nuclear conference. Apparently some of the participants were infected with this APT. Attribution, according to Kaspersky, was difficult because in the APT we found wrong flags. They were signed by misnomers, with misnomers. It only attacked some days and not other days. It was inactive on Fridays. No logs on Fridays and no activity on Saturday. It was considered to be the half-brother of Stuxnet because it was quite similar to Stuxnet. Okay, let us go back now, and now let us refer to Petya and not Petya. It has been classified as a ransomware. We are not fully sure about it. It was discovered last year and it was distributed through MedDoc, medical management software, primarily used in Ukraine. So ransomware, it is executed through run DLL32. Once it is run in the memory, it deletes itself, and then it adds a number of zeros in the memory. Does not use any 0-day, doesn't have any certificate, no nothing, and then it steals credentials through Mimikatz and other tools. So therefore this is more than ransomware. Well, by stealing the credentials stolen were used to distribute itself through the network. Okay, the procedures are following. I infect your team, I modify MBR, I force restart, and then I simulate that I am checking the disk. Well, the only thing that I'm doing is I'm just encrypting all your files. I am generating an encryption certificate, and then I encrypt it through Salsa 20. What is the difference between NotPetya and ransom WannaCry? Well, I encrypt it, and if you give me a ransom, good. But you will never ever be able to decrypt it, even if I give you a key to do that. Well, main impact was found in Ukraine. Well, even in Ukraine, more machines were infected than in the US. So huge, tremendous impact in Ukraine. So attribution. So the website of the White House, a couple of weeks ago, attributed this attack to the Russian military. And now let us move on to a different APT, Babar. I don't know whether you're aware of it. It had a direct impact on some of the Spanish companies. It was discovered in 2015. It was Snowden, through WikiLeaks cable, mentions it as having been used back in 2009. It's simpler than Dukutu. It is encrypted through AES, and then in the config file we got the key and the offset that were stored in the payload. So there we could see the programs it interacted with and the command and control pages it interacted with. If we take a quick look at it, we may see that the applications are applications for document management, messaging, and video conferencing. The objective is smooth and clear, intercepting communication and send them out. Objectives, targets were companies in Africa, Canada, and Spain. Interesting information about this name. It comes from a French cartoon. Debug mode was activated, and there were many messages making a reference to French acronyms and to the French cartoon. And that's why attribution was given to Animal Farm Group that had developed a number of APTs in a similar manner. To summarize, so even you have two ransomwares and two APTs, they are very much different from each other, both in terms of the difficulty of the code and also different in terms of the infrastructure needed by them. So there is a difference between infecting a team through a 0-day or through a known exploits. So to summarize, if you want to develop malware, we have to think about a team of developers. We've seen that there are different people involved in the process. In some of the debugging messages, we could easily see that they were written in different languages in the code. So therefore, we would also need development resources, either encryption mechanisms, our own or others. Then if we need a certificate, we also have to see whether we want to make that certificate ourselves without being suspicious. We also need infrastructure, command and control servers, wallets, BTC, and then a way to distribute it. Once we have our objective, there is a difference between distributing it through exploits, 0 days, or phishing campaigns. And that's the reason why Javier now will take over and tell you more about this complexity and all these differences that we found. Well, now at this point, so we have to be aware that malware is diverse in terms of complexity. It also requires a specific infrastructure. So it requires specific deployments or rollouts, and then who or what defines its development and deployment. So we always put the blame on Russia, but this is not always the case. They are not the one and only actor. Okay, let us abstract ourselves a bit. So have you ever questioned or asked yourselves, why do you define who makes that malware, why the malware is like that and not differently? How are these things? What do you have to do so that you are not caught? There are a number of strategic issues that you have to bypass, and popular imaginary says the following. So one day the US president wakes up and I say, okay, let us call NSA. And now I'd like you to infect half Europe for me, please. Well, in the case of Russia, this is much easier. So this is even personalized, okay? So Putin says, okay, let us, let's invade Crimea, and then let us do a couple of ransomware, and Russia is to blame. So in the Russian case, there is a significant duality here, because the Russian case is looked at in two different ways. And this is very well shown in the meme that shows a person dancing. And then we also have another meme with Putin. They are playing chess. They all have followed a master's course in mathematics at the University of Moscow. They are perfect. Okay, look, this is where Putin handles and manages all the malware in the world. So now, if we continue to follow those ideas and the reports issued by AV companies, they say that, well, this access to this restricted information is only done through malware. It seems that some countries are specialists in that and are the same countries who are doing that, and they obtain secrets of state. So attributions, zero attribution means that I know for sure that you've done that. That's the way it is. Some reports are along those lines, but in Dugutu points at Israel. So the thing is that nowadays attribution says, okay, yes, malware sample, the language, infrastructure, well, bombarding of tweets, this and that, and at the end of the day we are impacted by that. But let us see how this is done. Okay, so we have Putin and Donald Trump here. What happens here? Well, a country has strategic needs that wants to get an understanding about. So different countries have different strategies and needs, and they need intelligence to make decisions. For instance, government A wants to find out what is government B is doing in financial issues. So they design an intelligence operation for that. And now let us try and look at why malware exists. This is very important, because if we know why malware exists or the needs that malware covers, we could be more accurate in our attribution. Basically, well, these parts of this presentation will be about intelligence. So second bullet point is what Guardia Civil says. This is about disclosing news able to change an already made decision, or that will help you make decisions. Therefore, we say that this is a product coming out of an evaluation and an interpretation of the information gathered by an intelligence service. So this comes from the manual from the army. So let us imagine this scenario. Tajikistan and Pakistan. These are two border countries. They are in trouble, they are quarreling, they are arguing with each other because they are having a dispute. They are fighting over a region that is located in Pakistan. But there is a change in government in Pakistan, a government which is hostile to the government of Tajikistan. So therefore we have a problem. There is a change of government, then that government is hostile, and I have to make a number of decisions that will have an impact on my relationship with that country. Therefore, what will be my strategy? That's where everything starts. It's been said that there is a need of intelligence. I have to make a decision, and I don't know how to make that decision. I don't know what to do. Well, because the state's country is impacted, the country says, okay, I have a number of tools that I can use. Could be either my diplomatic channels, my relationships with my allied countries, and I also have an intelligence community. when in reports you read that this has been tested, they are referring to the intelligence community. So what is an intelligence community? And Donald Trump, I am putting, and I said, well, the community of intelligence is a set of bodies devoted to gathering and producing intelligence. Well, I'll give you, in Spain we have the National Intelligence Center, the Armed Forces CISPA, and CITCO. Contrary to the UK government, they are either doing internal or external spying. In Spain, that is organized by areas. And the CISCO will have Guardia Civil, national police forces. They are dealing with terrorist issues both internally and externally. Then we have the FIFA from the armed forces. I said, well, if the government has a problem with us, we will end up in the war. Okay, FIFA handles that. And then CNA. So that's strategic intelligence, that is to say with an impact on national security. And this is the thing, works in Spain. And then we have operational agents, operating agency agents. They are also part of this intelligence team. And why the community of intelligence has to handle all that? Well, for a number of reasons. Because it is good for everything. An intelligence service is good for everything. It embraces any odd thing you can think about. Then it also has a kind of a law of official secrecy. So intelligence service tells you that everything they do is secret, and then it also includes what it says on the screen. This is the most powerful tool that a country has. That is to say, a number of conflicts which are nearly non-existent. So therefore, an intelligence service is used for that, for those nearly non-existent issues. And then it is also an actual reflection of the capacities of that society, of that country. So people believe that an intelligence service is like what it looks like on the left, but actually it is like the right photographs. It is a pile of papers. So in Russia, things may be different, but not here. In Russia, it seems that everyone is a spy. Well, they are good at doing that because they have a history for that. And what does a state or a service does? Well, they put together an intelligence operation. I say, look, I am in trouble, I have this problem. Let us see how I can get useful information so that my boss, which in this case is the Prime Minister of my country, can make a decision. Okay, notice these conditions. Well, often in the civil society, this does not work. Well, I wouldn't say that it doesn't work, but it is so complicated that it is very difficult to follow. Well, in these last 13 months, I found very strange things. Okay, let us think about, and now let us focus about how I gather that information, that intelligence. Imagine that I am the head of the community of intelligence and I bring together my team. I go and say, look, this morning Putin got up and then he wants us to get information about this case. Then they activate the sources of information, and then those of us who are working on that, we start to get lost, okay? Because there is not a technical way to gather information. It is, you may obtain the information or not, but you are never fully sure. So now, a message to OSINT people. It is very difficult to find the plan of operation of a country, to find that at Google. So the Twitter graph is okay, but actually it doesn't tell you whether you will be invaded or not. And then for those doing big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence, yes, that is important, but there is life beyond that. So therefore, how do you find relevant information? So we have a number of objectives or targets. So members of the government, the strategic companies, and then also relevant people. So the second point is important. If you are in a strategic company, you will get in trouble with other countries, because nowadays the policy of a country is defined not only by what I do, but also because of the companies. So sometimes the companies rule countries. Okay, so now relevant people as well.
So not to get caught. Why is it important not to get caught? I was having a chat with Manu Quintans for Malware. Use a strange name and you say it comes from Russia. It has no consequences, but if a state is caught red-handed and they say it's been you, at least we'll have a diplomatic incident between two countries. There will be tensions, there will be incidences, and then something that we usually disregard, there's always the possibility that after a certain cyber attack, someone may respond using conventional military methods. In fact, I remember an incident So what we need to develop the binary, we need to insert a certificate whenever it is needed, we need an infrastructure, and we need to deploy the binary without being related to it, or without being identified as someone who is connected to this. When you watch mainstream media, or things or statements made by antivirus companies, operation security, think about this. Those of you building malware at home, I'm sure you don't want the civil guard to get to your home and get caught. So one basic thing is to be detached from everything you do. This is a set of requirements. Basically, the detection of any information, action or data that could be observed by the enemy, and the actions that we must take in order to avoid this from happening, or reduce the likelihood down to an acceptable level. So, summarizing is operation security, reading, investigating, meeting the requirements that I have just read, and understanding that OPSEC is the responsibility of all stakeholders. Okay? This is 24/7. You need to be responsible. You need to be clear about what you do. So bearing in mind all of these basic elements, a state must have coverage, or a cover. Roman, you have everything. Wow, it must be a constant party in your home. You have everything I can think of. So we need to have a cover. This, or coverage. Coverage is a word that hovers around the other word, cover. Coverage and cover. So we need fake identities to start with. We need fake companies as well. We need infrastructure in other countries. I mean, you have to be careful, you have to be sensible, and you have to do things that make sense. And then a state must have global capacities to act. If, for example, I'm Russia, I will not do this from the Kremlin. I must have global capacity, truly global capacity. Truly global capacity doesn't mean that I buy a VPS in India. Global capacity means that I have infrastructure in other countries that I can use. I have a company, I have a workshop, I have a garage, I have anything. That is global capacity. Infrastructure in other places, beyond my borders. Those of you interested, if you're not asleep yet, after lunch, the Americans have something within the CIA called clandestine service, the director of operations, where you can actually read. A red team is similar to this. This is a team that pretends to be an external agent whilst carrying out cyber attacks. This is something a colleague of ours does all the time. We had a chat with him, and he told us about how they operate. They're really powerful when working on OPSEC. They can launch attacks of any complexity, of any level of complexity. In terms of infrastructure, things can get as complicated as you want. But if you want to be really comprehensive, you need to invest. Bear in mind that if someone is caught, there is an international institution which is in charge of identifying attacks. States must have the capacity to launch attacks from elsewhere. Designing binaries. A lot of people take for granted that these binaries must be extremely complex, and that is not the case. You just need something that does whatever you want it to do. End of story. It doesn't have to be highly complex. You might use a packer, a simple packer, and you will be ready to go. So meeting your requirements, achieving your goals, with a reasonable amount of time devoted to development, that would be it, no more than that. Again, you must be detached from it. It is really important that no one can relate you to the binary. A binary can be developed and compiled somewhere else. And then whoever builds the binary should not know anything about the final purpose. They develop, they compile the bug, but they don't know what the final purpose, what the final application will be for that bug. The guy is probably living in India, but whoever is paying for it lives somewhere else, far away. Infrastructure is delocalized. What happens when this happens? You have the binary built in India. Things can get really complex. Another thing is that reach is global. It must be reach. Obviously, you need resources and money to set up such an infrastructure. I was talking to Javier yesterday. He's investigating a malware which is actually advertised by a company. It is offering that malware to governments around the world. If you need 0 days, to give you an example, states either do them themselves or go to a company to buy them. And they don't make a phone call and say, this is the CIA calling, I want a 0-day exploit. So that's why the intelligence community must have an infrastructure which is truly global. And then bear in mind financial intelligence. Remember those incidents with the Panama Canal? Well, if you read the cable from WikiLeaks, there is a cable saying that they got details on the proposal by Spanish construction company SACIR, on their proposal for the enlargement of the Panama Canal. That was more or less 3.2 billion euros. 4.2 billion. The state, remember, the state is interested in a corporation. They get information about that tender from their sources, and then they contact a company. They tell the other company about the bids that have been placed for that tender. This is a headline from El País, the Spanish economy. We don't know the level of intrusion that Chinese espionage has achieved within Spanish companies, but we have no doubt that they're spying on Spanish companies. Colonel Mila Pavial from the National Cryptology Center delivered a presentation recently saying that the Chinese have improved a lot on everything they do with OPSEC. They have become much more professional. They have realized that this is a problem for them if they're connected to these things. There is a couple of papers if you're interested in financial intelligence or economic intelligence. Those of you that have heard about this is about the 5 Porter rules, or the 5 Porter strengths. You can see a chart with all those elements, and that can be really cool. But the reality is different. In France, this is especially important for companies coming from engineering, from the pharmaceutical industry. It is the states that pay attention to companies to develop their own strategies. In Spain, we're rather peculiar, and some time ago, something was launched under the title Integrated System for Financial Intelligence. Since this was set up in Spain, it didn't work. No one was sure about what it meant. What do we do in Spain, or what do they do in Spain? Well, the Spanish government uses its own intelligence services, financial intelligence services, so that whenever the king visits a country, there's lots of things happening behind the scenes. There's lots of complicated things going on. There's political fights. I remember the case of a company where someone would travel to a certain airport, his laptop would be stolen, and a book would be placed in his suitcase. Same weight as the laptop. That's what the Russians do. If I take that laptop and have to analyze it with my resources, well, my resources are limited. But if it's a state that has to break into that laptop, they have all the necessary resources to do so. And then, what happens when states don't support their own companies? There are states that don't have the resources to do so. Well, they contact companies. Those companies deliver so-called private intelligence services for that state at a reduced price. There's a lower risk. You can always disguise yourself so that no one can relate you to whatever happened. That is a completely different scenario. But then we need coverage. We need to go back to the concept of coverage. And finally, what happens with the others? If you've taken a look at the 4 binaries that we have analyzed, we have one which is developed by the intern, and then we have the others that are really complex. In Duku 2, the designer gives priority to security rather than efficiency or effectiveness. It's persistence that we want to achieve. If they patch the vulnerability, you're already inside the system. This binary I'm mentioning, what it did, as David was explaining before, when you reset, I will find another way to get into your system. Security above effectiveness. And then the number of samples is an important parameter. Kaspersky tells us about 100, perhaps, but there's lots of others that are unknown. If we compare this with the other business model, with ransomware, this is very different. I infect your computer, I encrypt your hard disk, and I want a ransom to be paid for it, in exchange for unblocking it. You pay, I give you the key so you can unblock the contents. It's a bit different. Where is the weakness? Well, infrastructure, because they have to rely on third parties. Bava is an example. This goes back to 2009, 2010 with OPSEC. In the development of the sample, they were not too proficient. If you like the world of malware, finding something like Bava is quite rare. It happens very seldom. You have strings with the name Tovarich, and that's it. In the case of ransomware, they don't do those things. They give you very good service, they have nice infrastructure, they may be Russians, Americans, but at the end of the day, it's money they want to make. And then money laundering media methodologies. They make money move, basically. These people must move that money in different ways. I've seen hackers uploading their ID numbers to certain portals. I've seen people doing very strange things, very complicated things. But at the end of the day, you may have bitcoins, for example. A card under whoever's name is not that easy. Message to take home. When we hear that they've been the Russians, think twice. It is not that easy. And above all, remember how states behave. They cannot be linked to the problems detected. Our minister in Spain very recently identified the Russians as those being operating behind the scenes in Catalonia. I'm not sure you read Russian media. I don't, myself. If you read between the lines, well, that was quite an incident. There was a response from the Russian government complaining about the minister's statement. We almost got a diplomatic incident because of that. Well, I know this is an unusual presentation, and I know it's after lunch. And I know that I speak really fast. Logic, thank you. So thank you for coming. Thank you so much.
¿Una pregunta o vamos ya a tomar cerveza?
Any questions, or should we go for the beer? We have a tab outside. Questions, doubts, comments? Any volunteers for the questions? This comment you made on the Panama Canal, I can assure you that many of the leading companies of this country take for granted that we only focus on hacking systems. And that's everything we do. I keep meeting people, some of them are very senior, in big companies, and they still think that cybersecurity is like a joke. Oh yes, we spend €1,000 on buying a license for a firewall and that's it. And don't worry about the tenders. In France, this is state politics.
Una cosilla, a veces cuando se habla de...
Sometimes when we talk about international stakeholders, and to be more specific about the intelligence community, we tend to forget, well, I know a case in the States. There's lots of intelligence agencies competing against each other, with companies competing against each other as well, and sometimes decisions are not as rational, as you have explained. In the intelligence community, they set up what they called was a task force. You've mentioned something which is very interesting. Their intelligence community supports their companies in a much more direct way than in Spain. But decision-making processes at this level can get really complex. People only know what they absolutely need to know. But what you mentioned in the States is true. They have some 17 or 18 different agencies, but they're split, they're detached from each other. You're internal, I'm external, so they go together, in general terms. This is the world of intelligence. People don't tell the truth, not even to their doctor. You know what I mean? Any more questions? There were some hands up there. From the point of view of intelligence services in Spain, Obviously, they collaborate with companies. They usually attend events like this one. My question is, do you think they may have got involved in certain campaigns? I have no knowledge of that because I don't spend my time on those questions. But it is true that only recently the former director of the French intelligence gave a talk, and this guy mentioned a number of things. He said that Baba had been made in France. He lost his marbles. DGSE and DGSI with different roles. Well, this gentleman got questions after that talk. He got a question about the European intelligence services. He mentioned the Spanish intelligence service. He said that staff is highly qualified, but we don't have the resources. We don't have the money. Any more questions? I see a hand over there. Remember that there will be free drinks between 8 and 10. Tar Logic will bear the cost. Estrella de Galicia. Hi, Javier. 2 questions from me. And when the NSA blames others, like Kaspersky, for example, should we believe that? Or should we still pay our licenses? Let me be candid. David, are you using Kaspersky? This is my point of view. I think it would be rather very unusual that Kaspersky shoot themselves on the foot. Do they have collaborators everywhere? Of course, I'm sure.
Me parecería muy raro. Como me parece raro que se haya infectado a un directivo de Kaspersky con spear phishing. Eso suena más a una labor operativa de que alguien coge...
So your laptop is stolen. You know what can happen. States can do whatever they want. I don't think Kaspersky did what they allegedly did. Companies may be exposed, but what's the average size of a company to be facing really high risks? Whenever someone wonders about the activity of that company, that's it. I've seen companies with relatively small volumes of revenues, and they've been attacked. Why? Because there are significant competitors. Someone with revenues around 300, 400 million, maybe doing business beyond our borders. 75% of our companies are doing things beyond our borders. As soon as a competitor is worried about them, you have a problem. And about propaganda? Getting straight into the matter. Obviously, the question on Kaspersky is part of the propaganda campaign. I'm sure of that. No.
Ahí, que fue un accidente y un error, no tuvo nada.
I know this was probably an error, but anyway. Launching a campaign is part of the manipulation procedures? Of course, of course. I infect you, I steal from you, and then I laugh. But then information manipulation. When NATO goes to Afghanistan, and instead of shooting the Taliban, they do other things. We have manipulation in place everywhere. But we have to bear in mind one thing. Every state does this, and it's not only Russia. Russia does it because it has to do it. Spain does it? Of course, we need to do it. France does it. I'm sure they do it. If at a given point in time I have a goal, I want to kick this antivirus company out of the market, I will do whatever it takes. No one is... And for the people in the round table coming along later, the press helps to clarify. or the press helps in intoxicating everyone. What should I say about this? You're a civilian. You can say whatever you want. We need to know journalists, we need to know their style, we need to know who pays them. A few years ago, we found out about political parties paying journalists to talk about them. Are they a means to an end? Of course they are, but there are also journalists who disclose genuine information, genuinely hidden information. You must always think, why is this happening? What's the story behind the scenes? I'm sure there's always a bias, but with a bit of common sense, you should be able to realize that they're selling you a story which is simply not true. Any more questions?
Perfecto, muy bien. Pues
Muchas
muchísimas gracias.
Very well, thank you so much.